So Roger, over to you. You've done quite an interesting research project on the topic of reinventing business, reinventing work. Can you tell us a little bit about the research that you've done?
Thank you, Hendrik. We started the research in January, and we spent 3 months interviewing CIOs right across Europe. And Hendrik has spent a good deal of his time actually TV interviewing all of those participating in the panel today. So that has actually given us a real top-level view of what's going on in the reinvention of business and the redesign of work. And of course, today I'm delighted to share the findings with all of you.
Okay, great. So Roger, let's first talk about why we need to reinvent our businesses. You've come up with a couple of findings in that chapter, let's say. So what's the first finding that you found why businesses need to reinvent themselves?
Of course. So the overarching theme that came out of our research is the fact that COVID has dramatically increased the speed of decision-making across all the corporations we spoke with. That includes government as well as private sector. There's been a huge shift in corporate mindset, and I think one that was well overdue. And to summarize, I think the risk of not doing something now exceeds the risk of actually doing it. So we are into a very different era of management.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk about that. Maybe Dimitris, let's start with you, if that's okay. Ferrovial, large industrial, large group. You do airports, you do highways, big constructions, and so on. So how has the speed of decision making changed in your organization?
I think what Roger has highlighted is true, and we have lived in our own experience. We are still living the dramatic effect in several of our assets, not those that we build, those that we operate, like Heathrow airports and many others. Not temporarily, from one day to the other, we realized that our situation was much more fragile with an unexpected input. From years to now, we were exploring other source of revenues, more connected with trends that were much more difficult to overestimate. We make a lot of efforts to get inside the mobility arena, trying to be much more closer to the tendencies of the final consumer, trying to stimulate their appetites and so on, and trying to adopt something that has been right now consolidated like a very interesting technique. We are not anymore analyzing in the long term without giving different scenarios. We are not talking about a strategic plan. We talk about cones of uncertainty, and we are adopting different techniques in order to bring unexpected ideas and try to capture unexpected opportunities, like several of the ones that we presented recently, jumping in the urban air mobility ecosystem with German companies, diversifying sectors, and trying to iterate with the assumption that if we fail in an early stage, something that for a large infrastructure company never was admitted. You build a bridge, never you are gonna conceive that bridge could be under the problem. But this is something that has been inoculated really fast during these 15, 16 months, and the entire company is facing much more rapid decision in new territories, and with the perception that those areas could represent the potential future new source of revenue, so complement in a more dynamic way that resilience type of business that we want to build. Yeah.
Thank you, Dimitris. Adam, if you maybe could go to you, in a bank, and you are the biggest bank in Poland. That means that very traditional business, long decision cycles, I can imagine traditionally. So how has the last 12 months changed that decision-making process? We've made decisions, let's go all work from home. That was decided very quickly. But what's the fallout now that you see on other business decisions? Do you see that other business decisions, and maybe you can give an example, are now also being taken quicker, even in an organization where security and privacy and so on is very important?
Hendrik, thank you for this question. Fortunately, everything, this long time necessary for the taking decision, it was something what was 10 years ago. So we already get used to react very, very rapid and to try to catch the business and to catch the expectation of the customer. So last 12 months, honestly, didn't surprise us. It's just proof that all decision it was taken, a few years ago, especially 1.5 years ago, when we finally defined a road to cloud strategy in order to go deeper to the cloud, to get rid of 1 hour data center in order to have the hybrid cloud operate also on the public cloud. That was just confirmed during this pandemic period, and this is something what I'm really proud of, because our road to cloud strategy started 1.5 years ago. Our transformation, when we're talking about the changing the way of cooperating with the business, with this agile way, with the tribes and the teams, we're working together, sitting. That was the project that we started 3.5 years ago. The full transformation we started 10 years ago. So this is something what we are already in place. Even I first of all, I would like to congratulate to Vargha for the success of UiPath. This is something what I was thinking to establish this kind of company 8 years ago, and unfortunately I didn't found enough supporters. But I really proud that this kind of achievement you already achieve in this moment, because it's a automation, RPA, the general approach is something what we are using also in PKO on a daily basis. So this is something what is really supporting us. So fortunately, this last year, last 12 months, it was for us just a consumption our already the well implemented technology and digital footprint. What we are proud of is our mobile banking. This is our super app that we move almost all our transactional things, some additional services, not necessarily related only to the banking. All the sales processes, also onboarding processes, is something that we have on our mobile app. And this, during this 12 months, become for PKO the most important channel with the relation with the customer. Of course, what was important also for us, because we have around 1,000 branches, which typical brick and mortar branches in terms of the buildings, but we also have to adopt with this applying some security measures for our employees in the branches, which were exposed for some risk, in order to serve our customer, also sitting in the branch in the remote way, applying some video conference, applying some processes, remote processes, which can be done successfully via mobile apps and so on. So this last year, it was just the consumption, and we are really proud of this.
Okay, so let's open to the other panelists, Sanjay and Kurt and Karsten. Do you have examples of how in your organizations decision making is now quicker than before?
Yeah, if I may, I can follow up with that discussion. As I'm very well aware of the fact when that all started, because that was the time when I started my new role in IT, and there were like decisions to be taken to work from home, for example. The German authorities said we're all supposed to work from home now with the pandemic. So how are we going to do that? So my first decision was we roll out Microsoft Teams overnight. A decision like this has never been happening before, and it wasn't even possible before. Before that, we had like lengthy discussions with various committees, in particular, for example, the Works Council, as this is something in Germany which is quite relevant. But the crisis also gave us the chance to take a decision very quickly and to keep on moving things. And that was beautiful at the time. The other one was working from home. You know, in a German organization, work from home is not exactly what you do. You just go to the office every day, basically. And then overnight, we also decided we got to send the people home that are like regular office workers so that they are able to work from home. And this was also a discussion and decision taken overnight. The reason for that was people wanted answers. You know, if the authorities say you got to work from home and the company says, yo, we don't know what to do that and we don't know how to do that now, this is not going to work. So we were also forced to be very, very quick on that.
Yeah, nothing as important as or as good as a compelling event to bring change, I would say, in big organizations. Maybe I will get back to Kurt and Sanjay in a moment, of course. Roger, let's go to the second finding of your research on why companies are reinventing themselves.
Of course, Hendrik. Again, under a very broad heading, Adam was actually perfectly right. There have been a confluence of business factors in progress in the pipeline for probably 10 to 15 years. But COVID has actually accelerated the rate of change. So just to mention some of those business factors, clearly distributed working has already happened. It happened well before the pandemic for many organizations, but it reached a crescendo last March. Online everything, shopping, education, healthcare. Again, all of these things are not new, but suddenly, almost at a flick of a switch, they became the norm. The increasing dominance of digital natives. Again, last year, we just observed the digital natives, their values shot up dramatically against all the incumbents. And they have clearly secured a big lead in many equity marketplaces. I think the other really important factor here was the inability of most organizations to actually cope with the explosion in online interactions. I mean, heaven help us, if you wanted to call your bank or your retailer or your doctor in March of last year, forget it. The lines went down and there was just a real lack of response to a very urgent situation. And then, of course, there's the customer experience itself, which relates, of course, to that fact. Most of the business transformation activities up till the pandemic had been largely focused on back office. In reality, it was HR, it was finance, etc. Suddenly, organizations again realized that the whole focus had to be purely and simply on the customer experience, if they were even to survive. And that again drove a lot of activity around data-driven insights and the exploitation of data itself. So I think all of those different factors were in the offing well before the pandemic, but suddenly the pandemic accelerated the convergence of those different aspects.
Sanjay, you want to comment on that for Tate and Lyle? Which were the most important business factors that drove the change in your organization? And by the way, I'm gonna start a poll for those people in Zoom so that they can chip in their replies here as well.
Thanks, Hendrik. Look, as I think has been mentioned, the pandemic was clearly a change catalyst in terms of accelerating things that were already happening. And as some of you may know, Tate & Lyle is 160 years old. So reinventing business is part of what we've been doing in order to survive. One of the few organizations still left in what was originally the FTSE 5, now the FTSE 100. So we were on that journey. But the change catalyst of the pandemic accelerated many things, as Adam and Roger and others have stated. So for us, it was actually across the whole enterprise. On the front end, our customers are consumer products companies creating food and beverages in the home and out of the home. Out of the home more or less disappeared overnight. So we had to reinvent how we were going to make up that part of the business. In-home and online became much more prevalent. People eat more at home because children aren't going to schools or restaurants or otherwise. So we had to take advantage of that. People were using online platforms a lot more. And those online platforms have to post things to people and they use paper. And we produce starch. So we had to find alternative uses for some of the products that we were already using, but in a different way. And the digitization helped us in terms of connecting with customers so that nearer real time, rather than getting on a plane, arranging a meeting and meeting with customers, we would press a button and they would be on the other end of the screen, and we'd be able to collaborate much more efficiently. So lots of examples, like many others, as to how that accelerated a journey that we were already on, helped us to sort of prove how technology could underpin the reinvention of business, and therefore put sort of technology more on the front foot as we come out of the pandemic and continue that digitization and reinvention of the business. Okay, great. Let me share the results of the poll. Many people have, about 100 people have answered the poll here. And the question was, what are the 2 most compelling reasons to reinvent your business post-COVID? And the majority, I mean, the highest score was the hybrid working. And between home and office, that was the new norm. That was the number 1 driver here. The second was increased productivity. So that's of course a big driver. And number 3 was that online customers become much more demanding. So I think that's very, very interesting insights here, Roger. Kurt, let's have a look at how you look at it from Signify's point of view. In your business, in the lighting business, what are the major business factors that driving change today?
I think if you look at it in a wider point of view, it's digitization, it's the aging population, mainly looking then also at food, and then the whole environment and safety. So I think those are the wider concepts. Now, of course, what we have seen with COVID is that the big projects basically were put on hold. So we mainly focused on other things. So we have seen a big acceleration, for instance, in the use of UVC lighting, which we now see appearing in many different places. Now, UVC is not a new technology, but all of a sudden, within a matter of weeks, we find all kinds of new ways of deploying technology. And maybe to some of the points that Roger said is that, and also to the previous point, the speed at which decisions have been made to invest go from typically we had yearly cycles, yearly portfolio, to now, then it was quarters, and it was now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. So also there additional funds were made available, especially focusing on the online. In the B2C segment, the really focus on user experience, making sure our websites have basically almost direct response time and those type of things. I think from a workforce point of view, already when we separated from Royal Philips, the decision back in 2016 was taken to go online for everything. So basically all our sites are internet connected. So in March last year, when we decided to put the whole of Europe and the Americas home from one day to the other, I still remember it was on a Tuesday. Luckily, we were prepared. Now, from a technology, it worked, but of course, from a people point of view, people had to get used to basically being alone, no more having the social contact. Now, like Carsten said, we already had Teams. But then it was also how do you go about with Teams, and then also how you compensate for missing some of the social interaction. In response to the speed, what we also looked is at the deployment of more tactical solutions. And for instance, for our B2B, we have the hybrid e-commerce suite, and that takes some time to make changes and to roll out. For the B2C, we mainly focus on the Adobe suite. But then we also decided to start using Shopify, because with Shopify, within a matter of weeks, it's not the same, it's not a full experience, but hey, we have a challenge here in Singapore, or in Indonesia wants that. We have gone from the more mid to longer term planned projects to really being, I think, very agile and spot on. Looking at opportunities and then making sure that within a matter of weeks we could respond to that.
Okay, great, good. Roger, let's go to the third finding. in the chapter of why companies are reinventing themselves.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is actually good news. So while businesses were under a lot of pressure last year, particularly to change and adapt, all the technologies that were needed are actually in place and really quite mature. For example, cloud had reached maturity by 2020 and was providing highly scalable platforms where large amounts of data, large amounts of interactions could easily be accommodated. That wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago. Equally, cloud was enabled home working. Microsoft 365, for example, easily rolled out in a cloud environment. Again, Adam mentioned mobile devices. Mobile has become the front line for all customer interactions of whatever kind, and not just customers, but employees as well. So mobile devices, highly mature, highly accessible to pretty much everyone. Other interesting aspects here, software as a service. A lot of organizations today have adapted to software as a service, whether it's Workday or Salesforce or any other major service. Again, cloud-enabled, universal, highly scalable, and therefore a very suitable platform for global working. The fourth one, which is of course very relevant today, is smart automation. RPA has been around certainly for 5 to 10 years. It's now entering maturity. It's being applied universally. So again, RPA tools and techniques such as chatbots were deployed rapidly to accommodate increases in customer interactions. And last but not least, of course, AI itself is now beginning to mature, although I'm sure Vargha can tell us more about that. The other interesting aspect, of course, is automation is enabling non-linear growth. And what we've seen, particularly in outsourcing companies, is a massive program of automation because they just couldn't expand their numbers at the rate that their customers were expecting. Up to 40% of jobs in those major outsourcing, functional outsourcing activities, BPO, are now being automated, particularly using RPA. So, as I said, all of those tools seem to have come to our disposal at the right time and given us the opportunities to cope with a very rapidly changing business environment.
Thank you, Roger. Vargha, could you comment on this, please? Do you see technology really as a driver for change and as a driver for companies to reinvent business? And out of the mobile software as a service, cloud, automation, and so on, and artificial intelligence and so on, which are for you the most important ones?
I think we said, and Roger's first point was the speed of decision making has increased, which is really good. And it is because I think speed of innovation, and especially for digitally native, has increased. There's a general civilizational tendency for everything to increase in speed. But in addition to increasing the speed of decision making, then there is a second challenge, which is to be able to increase the speed of deployment of that decision. And here, I think this is something that will probably speak to my panelists here. It is one thing to say as a business person, oh, I would like this workflow to be automated. And traditionally, with the traditional IT tools that you had, most business users were confronted with the frustration of rightly so, being told by IT, yes, come back and it's going to take us 6 months to a year for us to be able to deploy what you're asking us. And with the extreme example of COVID, where people had to all of a sudden, and then we had clients in hospital or airlines, to digitize a workflow at a different level, they had matters of days, of weeks to actually implement that. So it is clear that in the speed of innovation and decision making has increased, but equally, CIOs are going to require tools that allow them to then deploy the response faster. And again, they cannot also rely only on their own troops. They're going to need business to be co-producer of these changes. And Kurt was mentioning Spotify. This is another example of a company showing agility. he has shown that he uses another type of service to reach his overall objective. So I think what is particularly important, and cloud is one element, because you can indeed, with software as a service and an infrastructure as a service, which what cloud is ultimately, ramp up technology and IT power to serve a business decision faster. So serving business decision faster is a common important theme. So all the technologies that are going towards allowing this, being cloud, being now what we call full automation, RPA, a mixture of RPA, API, etc., things that you can deploy much faster. Because today, legacy or digital death are no longer created in matters of years. They are created literally in matters of months. So you need a new tool in your toolkit in terms of technology to allow our CIOs to be able to respond to the demand of customer who have become much more demanding, as the poll says, and business innovation in a much faster and most cost-effective ways. So all the technologies that go in that sense are very important for business, in my view.
Thank you, Vargha. I would like to call Luc Hendriks for a moment on screen here. Luc is our CEO, and he is monitoring the Q&A, and so he will represent everybody that's following this conference. So, Luc, what is the number one question that people want to know?
Oscar Pedrosa from Guatemala is with us, and he had a question. He wanted to know how you did the change management side of starting to work in this completely different way when COVID hit and when the home working, the additional home working and the remote working had to happen. So did you do any specific actions towards your people to educate them on the new tools, the new way of working, and how did that go?
I think one of the things we focused on was communication, and also focusing on social engagement, for instance, through using Yammer. Because fairly quickly what we noticed is that every meeting had a functional purpose. And you just went from a functional thing into a functional thing into a functional thing. So a lot of the typical human interaction, the talk by the coffee machine, let's go together for lunch, which is also very good for creating new ideas. All of that basically was missing, and we only did, let's say, fill in this form, program this thing, bring this live. So we really started organizing virtual coffee corners, virtual pub quizzes. So basically we had a team sessions with a beer, just to talk about things. So really to make sure that especially also people that are home alone, that they would basically still keep the social engagement. I think that was really an important one for us. So. Okay.
Good. Yes, please, Sanjay.
Maybe just add to that. I think if you go back to the very early days, I think some of us can remember that, right? There were a few things for us. First of all was just sort of role model from the top. Because if we know that the top of the organization is embracing the technology, then the rest will follow. We also had early adopter groups by functional area, to finance people, talking to finance people about what some of their challenges were, large Excel spreadsheets and the time lag in terms of updating those were problems that we had to deal with. And the bandwidth that some of you experienced when you join the call in different countries is not all the same. But we had those within communities that could talk to each other and can solve the problems for them. So some of those were the topics in addition to Kurt's point about communication, but we sort of had to learn to crawl before we walked, before we ran. And so we paced out that deployment because it is a big change. And we had to sort of prove the credibility of the technology piece by piece by piece, rather than saying big bang and everything sort of get done overnight. So releasing the meeting capability first, then the chat capability comes, then some of the social elements come, then the backgrounds that you can see that we could use. So gradually introducing new functionality so that people could get acquainted and talk amongst themselves in terms of how those things were getting adopted.
Okay.
Yeah, just to reinforce on top of Sanjay and fully align, what we had to model was the speed of those changes in order to guarantee that all of them were able to be digested properly by organization. No, it was not just a conceptual, it's a matter of how much your work in progress or your transformation in progress is how to be accepted, no, and to detect if the speed was the proper one, or we could accelerate introducing more feature, more adaptations to the way they used to work was really relevant. We apply a lot the adoption of chapters, transversal chapters above our divisions, above our domain, just to talk about particular pain points that would be perceived much more realistic if were transferred by the lesson learned of the final users. No, at the end, we were catalyzer of that flow of information, allocating the digital resources, but letting the organization as an organism that is keeping the balance by itself, solving their problems with the power of the last input that was open to the entire organization. No? And on top of that, bringing data and KPIs to size if the figures were reflecting what we were capturing during all those sessions. Is everybody using in the same way? The sessions are expanding, the features are adopted or not? KPIs were really relevant to have a harmonized perception about how equalized were one areas or others in the adoption.
Okay.
Hendrik, there's one thing I would like to add on the change management aspect, though, which is, the technology was there, we were all used to that and stuff like that. But the real change was when you're like working from home and you were asked to put your camera on. I did see resistance there in the beginning. And then when the first things with the blurry backgrounds and stuff started, people were willing to share their screen and show their video picture. And then all the things started with company backgrounds and Teams and Zoom and stuff like that. So this was really a change curve that I was experiencing.
Okay, great. Now, for everybody following this, we are putting the links to the small survey that we're running in the chat and LinkedIn and so on. So if you want to win this experience, make sure to take a couple of minutes and click on that link.